tonight's segment, we will talk about the decisions that consumers make in sports, the challenges and issues with sport consumer behavior, and lastly, the ethics in promoting sport consumer behavior. So to start off, let's talk about how a consumer makes a decision. Once we have understood how this process works, we are going to bring in a special guest and talk about their decision-making in sport. So first, the decision-making process begins with the recognition of a need or problem that will initiate you to gather more information about potential solutions. These needs or wants are influenced by motives, perceptions, attitudes, experiences, or by reference groups and subcultures that are important to individuals. This first step is called need recognition. The specific definition of need recognition is the perception of a difference between the desired state and the actual state. So, for example, Sally's soccer cleats are worn out and she really needs a new pair. Next, once the individual has identified their need, an evaluation of the alternatives is done, and the best option will lead the individual to either participation in the sport, usage, or purchase, such as purchase of equipment or apparel for the sport. After the individual has determined what her best purchase options are, which is based off of possible experiences or can be loyalty to the brand, they then can go to the two types of evaluations. The first being a list of potential products, and the second being the features and characteristics they will use to evaluate these products. It is the sport marketer's job to identify these features and which are best for their target audiences. The consumer's expectations of the product are known as consumer demand, which can mean an array of pull factors to encourage new and returning customers. Once the product is finally purchased, the consumer will now go through post-product evaluation. This evaluation can establish whether or not the product lived up to their expectations. This evaluation is important for customer satisfaction for marketers because the satisfaction will affect future purchases and the reputation from word of mouth for the product. Since social media is such a big influence now, the reputation of the product is very important. Sport marketers must also ensure the best service quality is given, which indicates how well the service was delivered and the interaction between the consumer and the service provider. And lastly, just to note on this topic, it is also important to make sure consumers don't fall into cognitive dissonance and feel as though they made the wrong decision and end up regretting the sport product. Alright everyone, since we've learned a little bit about our consumer decision making in sport, we're just going to take a quick break, listen to an ad, and we'll be right back with our special guest.
Guys, with the TD Cashback Visa Infinite card, you can earn cash back fast on everyday purchases, which is a lot easier to earn than all of this. We're good? Magic!
Alright folks, you guessed it. We are back with our special guest, Ruth Wilson, the head coach of the Canadian National Women's Gymnastic Team. Thank you for coming on tonight's segment on the Lauren, Aksenia, and Courtney Show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Alright, Ruth. So when the team needs new apparel or equipment, what would be the decision process and thoughts that go through your head as you make this decision?
Well, first, I'd like to think of what the gymnasts actually need and what equipment they still use.
That is excellent. You establish need recognition.
Well, yes, I do. I really like to do my research and see all the options available. Then I will look at the potential products and look at the different brands of equipment to which one has the best features and characteristics that will provide us with the best benefit.
That is a great start you have there. It looks like the sport marketers will have to do some target marketing. And are there any thoughts you have on your products living up to your expectations?
Well, yes, actually. Since I do my research, I can be confident that I'm not falling into cognitive dissonance and will not regret purchasing the brand new equipment for the national team. So I'm confident the equipment will live up to my expectations.
Yes, you always want to make sure you choose your best option. So, now that you have your equipment, what are your post-purchase thoughts?
It is fantastic. I like to evaluate how well the equipment is doing, either after a few weeks or months, and compare it to how the old equipment held up and how the gymnasts liked training with it.
Wow, that is just great. Well, it has been a pleasure having you on tonight's segment, and we really hope to have you back soon.
It has been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you have me back on another segment again soon.
All right, all you sport consumers, we are back. Now, let's talk about the 4 challenges and issues with the sport consumer behavior. First, we have what is called the meaning and emotion of sport consumption. This is where marketers need to know how the consumption of sport enables an emotional attachment, what influences the attachment, and how the attachments differ in terms of functions of culture or subcultural values. Second, we have the globalization of sport. This is where sport marketers must have a need to understand the different cultures and the differences and similarities that exist, and must work to tailor the sport products for optimal sales. Third, we have virtual consumption, which is online consumption mostly. So, for example, participants can purchase hard-to-find equipment, fans can buy tickets and licensed products for teams anywhere in the world. However, these purchases are only just the beginning. Fans can find communities and other fans online, such as Facebook or Twitter. They can also participate in online fantasy leagues. In addition to all these aspects, they can also post photographs or short videos from their sporting event on apps such as Instagram or Snapchat. They can also share their own thoughts and feelings about different sports or events on social media. And lastly is compulsive consumption. This is a repetitive consumption of sport to the point of addiction. This is not limited to just sport betting or fantasy leagues. Fans can travel all over and spend well beyond their means. Sport marketers must be aware to have effective marketing strategies, but also to not give in to feeding the consumer's addiction. Okay, so I know we said we would just be talking about decision-making and challenges and issues and ethical decisions, but lucky for you, we get a little bit more knowledge today. We're just going to take a quick second to talk about social media and sport consumer behavior. As social media is becoming more and more popular and becoming more and more of an influence, businesses and sport businesses are using this to their advantage. They're using what is called as user-generated branding. This is basically when a consumer or a fan of a specific product or service leaves some form of review or content on that product, and the business uses it to enhance their brand or sport product. So, to give a little example, let's say there's a hockey player who just plays hockey for his home team in Port Coquitlam. He then posts a picture of his new skates on Instagram with a caption about how nice they are. There has been new research that sport consumers will consider the consumer's brand review more authentic than the actual sport company review. This has led to several brands starting to use their consumer's review in their own social media posts. Okay, don't worry, you're almost there. We've almost made it. This is our last topic of the night, or day, depending on where you're listening from. This is the ethics in promoting sport consumer behavior. So sport organizations must make sure they are ethical as it can affect consumers' interests, beliefs, trust, and future consumption. Some of these fundamental ethics practices include professionalism, honesty, justice, fairness, and safety, just to name a few. And alright, that's a wrap for tonight's segment on the Lauren, Aksenia, and Courtney Show. We hope you all had a great listen and have learned some new and interesting points on sport consumers' behavior. Don't forget to catch us next week on our next segment. We post every Thursday at 9 a.m.